Hello and welcome to the ThyGap podcast. This is Bogus Noog.
And this is Being Brute.
And we've always had a saying in ThyGap, it's not easy. And this time we're looking at boundaries.
It's a new format?
It's a new format, something we're trying out.
Yes.
Because we want to expand on our philosophy.
And versatility. I thought you'll go with versatility.
You know, it's not easy.
It's not easy to name the format also.
Yeah, it is not easy.
I think the foundation on which ThyGap was built is this phrase.
Yeah.
It's not easy.
It is not easy. And maybe someday we'll explain where it came from, but there's still time for that.
Like we always say, there is an episode right around the corner about all the unanswered questions that you might be having with ThyGap podcast.
But yeah, boundaries. Bro, with every passing day, I just see that...
The boundaries dry up, like the great Ravi Shastri says.
No. I just see that this whole concept around boundaries is not really getting the appreciation that it deserves in common consciousness. There used to be a saying, good fences make good neighbors, but the meaning of that or the significance of that seems to have been lost in time.
Yeah.
And the way I see this manifesting nowadays is, I'll just take a quick corporate example. You have these freshers joining, corporations, and unfortunately, they're not really trained in, adult life, at least in our society. They're generally just left to fend for themselves. They come into these corporates, and there seems to be a self-imposed thought process that you have to be yourself. Wherever you go.
I understand where you're coming from, Bogus. And what I didn't expect is you genuinely go into philosophical stuff like common consciousness and all that jazz. But to the point that you mentioned, I really agree with you. Because all the freshers who are trying to come into the corporate world, our system doesn't train us to be adults. Our system trains us to be students of different forms. And it actually emphasizes it by unnecessary motivational quotes, like learning is a continuous process. You have to be yourself to become something. The world is your stage. All contradictory shit, but how do someone really make sense of this overload of information? Personality development specifically is something nobody ever teaches.
Yeah, and the downside of this kind of thought process, which is I have to just be myself wherever I go, among whoever I associate with, is that there is no clear definition in your mind subconsciously of, when I say definition, I also mean difference or margins. There are no margins. Like everything tends to get lumped up into one big blob.
Yeah.
It's
like a drainage system. You know what happens when you don't clean your drain?
It gets clogged.
It gets clogged.
Yeah.
That's because everything is just going to this small hole and you leave it there enough, it solidifies. It's like calcifies or does something.
Yeah.
And it just makes a mess.
Yeah. And there seems to be a compulsion that, if I know a bunch of people here and a bunch of people there, then I feel compelled to sort of make them into one unit. And, my social circle should be one and everyone should meet each other. Everyone should know each other. But what happens with this sort of unification is the same blob kind of effect. And another example for that is, let's say you have a goal in mind. It's a far-reaching goal and you're not breaking that goal down into smaller tasks or smaller steps. You always have...
Are you complaining about me? This sounds like me so much.
I mean, sure.
Don't take the ThyGap podcast recording sessions as an excuse.
I'll never not complain about you, but in this instance, I mean, when they don't break it into smaller steps or smaller goals, they're always mentally dealing with that one far-reaching goal. And in their mind, it is always that one big problem that is not further simplified. In a big social circle that they don't tend to differentiate or they don't tend to draw lines, everything again becomes that one big blob.
Yeah.
So the common factor that I'm seeing here is when everything tends to get, congealed into like one big unit or one big blob, then that is where, the general source of anxiety or stress stems from. because every time you think of a problem, you're looking at one big thing, and now you suddenly look too small to be able to deal with that shit.
Or you automatically associate it with the end result.
Yeah.
But I have a question here because you speak too dumb to me. How are you associating this with boundaries?
Right.
Because it's a very vague term.
Yeah.
I'm playing the devil's advocate. It's a vague term and we didn't prepare this. There are multiple forms of that, right? You have boundaries in relationships, you have boundaries in your workplace, you have boundaries at home.
Yeah.
Right? You have boundaries of how you speak to your father versus how you speak to your mother.
Right.
You have boundaries with your friends.
Yeah.
I mean, there are boundaries everywhere.
Right.
And if you look at it that way, it's practically impossible. The easier solution is I'll do whatever the fuck I want to do. Fuck with the boundaries. Right? I mean, you get what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
I can't keep a tab on each and every boundary to every place I go. So I'll just be myself. I am the constant. Let everything else change itself for my benefit.
Yeah, it's always easier to escape, isn't it? It's always easy to cop out, and it's
not escaping. It's a hack.
Yeah, that's what. It's easier to take a cop out because it's never easy. That's why we say
it's not easy.
It's not easy to do anything in a worthwhile manner.
That's what I wanted you to say.
It always takes that extra bit of effort. And when I say boundaries, I also mean in a larger sense, like organization, being organized about how you do things also is a way of drawing boundaries. For example, in your room, if all of your clothes are in one pile, it's not organized. But
obviously,
the way you're organizing this is, okay, I know where exactly my outside clothes go. It's one place. I know exactly where my indoor clothes go. That's another place. I know where my undergarments, my socks, etc. go. So because of this demarcation or organization, or also because of these boundaries between your clothing, what happens is the way you process or the time it takes for you to process where to get things from is reduced. It becomes simpler for you to know exactly what you want and where you have to get it from. This is the whole reason why minimalism has become such a fad and such a trend nowadays, because people feel the effect of clutter around them. It's kind of screwing with their mind, screwing with the way they want to go about in their day. And they feel that if they just get rid of useless stuff, then it helps them to think clearly, And there's a reason why they react to it in such a way as well, because it does actually have an effect in the real life, even though it seems so superficial and it seems so mundane.
It seems improbable.
Yeah, it seems improbable, but you just have a clear line of sight in your room and you have some empty spaces, some breathing space. It has an effect on you.
Yeah.
And the other way of thinking about boundaries or being organized is a lot of people tend to have this misunderstanding that in order to be articulate, you have to have vocabulary.
Yeah.
A good command over language.
Such a myth.
It's not true.
Yeah.
In order to be articulate, you need to have clear, objective thought process.
Yeah.
So your mind actually has to be organized for you to be able to think clearly and then be able to speak it out. What I see a lot of people doing nowadays is they're almost playing catch up with their thoughts. It's almost like they're just spitting out what's coming into their mind without much filtration, without much rearrangement.
And unfortunately, that is being called as being myself.
Yeah.
Being myself means I'm going to be transparent with my thoughts. So I'm going to talk and shout and give monologues on whatever I'm thinking. It's not what it means.
Yeah, I'm just going to start talking as things come to my mind.
Yeah.
That's not how it works.
Yeah.
In fact, being articulate, the best way of tackling articulation, a lot of people say is you write.
Write down your thoughts.
Or anything. You just practice writing, because the exercise of writing, it sort of tempers the pace of your thoughts. And it's sort of like an exercise or a workout for your mind. You're kind of controlling the pace of your thoughts because you can only write so fast.
Yeah.
You can't write at breakneck speed. So now you're forcing your thoughts to keep up with the pace of your pen. And because your pen is slower than your mind, by the time you actually put pen to paper and you write your words, you are going through a filtration process.
Yeah.
Or you are going through a refinement, sort of. And you practice that long enough.
It becomes a habit.
It becomes a habit and it affects the way you talk as well. Now you're able to...
Even reading does that. Even reading a lot does that.
Yes.
It's not vocabulary, but reading does influence your articulation. That's something I personally experienced. And reading also enhances your ability to think clearly. I don't know how it works.
Yeah.
But it does. every time I read a book, the immediate hangover or the after effect is for about like couple of days or so.
Right.
I'm having absolutely clear mind, you know. It is like I can literally place things wherever I want in my head. And that's an experience people have to experience. It's very difficult to explain it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think reading does that. Reading is the easiest way to get that habit.
Yeah. And what is actually going on in that process there is also you're drawing boundaries or you're creating boundaries.
Yeah.
You're creating definition around multiple things in your head rather than it being like one big blob, which is vague and without a proper definition. You are creating clear-cut objective lines between different things.
Yeah, but help me understand this. Do you think prioritization and boundaries are the same thing? Or which leads which?
I think they're two different things altogether.
But are they related?
Like one follows the other, I would say, because for you to have to prioritize, you need to know what your options are first.
Yeah.
And then you start sorting and, in the order.
Yeah.
So I think boundaries comes first and then you can start prioritizing.
So then can you reverse engineer this? Say if I first figure out my priorities, okay?
Okay.
And then do you think I'm in a better place to create my boundaries? For example, so I have like 5 things in my life. Say money, education, relationship. Let's take 3.
Right.
Okay. So now I've figured out that money is the most important thing to me. And then comes relationships. And then say comes education. So I figured out, okay.
The priority.
Now, whatever disturbs my P1, my priority 1, that's out of bounds. I don't allow it in.
Okay.
May it be relation, may it be education, may it be anything.
Okay.
Right? So you get the sense, right? Like then you cascade it to other priorities. Do you think there's also a way of exercising the art of boundaries?
Yeah, because
through priorities.
No, because what just happened in the example that you quoted is before you told me what had what priority, in which order, you listed out the 3 things.
Yeah.
Separately.
Yeah.
So that separation
is itself boundaries, you're saying?
Is boundary.
Okay. Fair enough.
So first you came to listing them out separately, then you sorted them in a priority order.
Got it. Interesting. You shooting down my example like that.
It's not shooting down because you.
It's a joke, bogus. We can tell jokes in this podcast, okay?
It was not a good joke.
It was sarcasm.
It sucked.
You suck.
But
like best comeback ever.
No, you.
No, you.
That's even better.
Yeah.
No, but that's what I mean exactly. When we think of boundaries, we tend to have a very narrow-minded understanding of that.
Yeah.
Usually people tend to apply that just in interpersonal relationships. But boundaries just means, and they also look at it like an aggressive thing. If you say you have to have boundaries, right?
Yeah, it's hard and fast.
People think that's aggressive. Yeah. Oh, you're saying you want to keep people at
distance.
Bay, at a distance. That's not what it means.
You can. You do.
I mean, yeah, but that's not what it all means. Boundaries are also organization, just separation, margins. If you draw clear, organized lines around things, you know the exact bounds of each and everything. And one example for me in interpersonal sense, right, if we have to look at it, one example that the way I've always applied it, even in my youth.
Yes.
No.
Even in your youth.
No,
I will drag it so long that you can't edit this shit.
I am editing.
No, you can't.
The one way I applied it, like even in my early adolescent years.
Youth.
Is I, as a person, have multiple interests, multiple passions.
It's hard to believe.
And the people that I associate with may not really be on board with all of them. Like a bunch of guys are on board with maybe 1 or 2 things. And then there's a completely different bunch of guys or who I can relate with on another hobby or interest. Yeah. So I always made it a point that I never mixed these social circles. I never felt an obligation that, this circle needs to meet my other circle so that we can all be like one big Suraj Barjatia, like
party.
Yeah.
Diwali
party. We play Antakshari and all that shit.
Yeah.
I was pretty happy with these circles being separate and no overlap because this way, whatever small interest or passion that I had, it got full expression in this group. And then the other part of me got its own full expression in another group. That way, from my perspective, whatever interests I have, differing interests, they all got their own forms of expression.
Got it. 2 things. Now I realize I've never met any of your friends.
Yeah.
In all these years I've known.
Yep.
And that tells me that I am a guy who you share a very unique and a very short list of interests with.
Yeah, I mean,
which is not a compliment.
that's the same with everyone.
No, it's not. It's not because you're an alien. Second thing, I don't agree with your concept, and it can be subjective to you.
Yeah, yeah.
The reason why I don't agree is from, like you said, it's from your perspective, it gives clarity to you. It also shows from a third man's perspective that there is a certain inability to create a conducive environment. Like I'm the exact opposite of you. I like to mix my circles.
Right.
I like to introduce one set of friends to the other set of friends and make it like it's not a party, but like introduce them in their own sense, right? And for their own sense. Why I do that is, for me, it helps me understand dynamics of groups better. If you have the same group, it's not much of dynamics that you understand. But if you have a variety of people with different interests and different alignments, put all of them in one place and say you are the medium through which they're all coming to that one place, then you are at a vantage point of understanding the dynamics individually as well as a group.
Okay.
And that is a huge learning. And for me, that is more exciting.
Okay.
So, which brings me to this question saying that, do you ever feel that there are instances where boundaries won't help? Like India, Pakistan. Boundaries won't help. It's a bad joke. But I mean, you get the point.
Yeah. Do I feel anywhere boundaries don't help?
Because there's always this point of pushing the boundaries also, right?
I don't get that.
You know, you always have, I mean, there's this thing that you want to grow, you want to evolve as a person.
Oh, yeah, that's a different...
You got to push your boundaries.
Yeah.
So I'm taking it to the extreme, to the point that at what point, if you keep pushing the boundaries, there will be no boundaries. The ideal state of pushing boundaries is there are no boundaries.
No, I think the ideal state of pushing boundaries is expansion.
Correct. And you have only so much that you can expand on, always.
Why is
That's the norm. The norm is you can expand to the maximum potential of your ability or your processing ability. Right. So at one point, you will saturate your processing ability. And that is a point where your boundaries are so vast that it's as good as, it's a dot, you know. So which brings me to the point as to what are the scenarios where, or what are the instances where boundaries shouldn't exist as much as they should, for your own benefit, by the way. Can you think of... I'm putting you at a spot, Bogus. Look into my eyes and answer me truthfully.
I think at a very larger level, like when you're thinking of community and you're thinking of unity with the fellow man, you know, when it goes to that extent, that is where I guess the boundaries should not exist. So it's at a very larger
but not
scope.
At like an individual level?
At an individual level, no, I feel boundaries should be there. For sure. I mean, that's my subjective understanding of it.
No, fair enough.
Yeah.
It's fair because the way I look at it, either way doesn't make a huge difference unless you apply to it.
Yeah.
You know,
course, yeah.
If you say you don't have boundaries, then you rather apply to yourself to that scenario.
Yeah. But the main purpose of, you know, this It's Not Easy bit for me was to kind of clarify the thing about boundaries not just being interpersonal and not just being, you know, restrictions like do not cross that kind of a line, but also organized, like being organized in the way you think or in the way you do things. Yeah. That is also a sense of boundary and what advantages that brings. You know, that's what I kind of mainly wanted to focus on.
Fair enough. So it's not easy to decide on boundaries.
Yeah.
It's not easy to maintain once you decided those boundaries.
Yeah.
And it's not easy to work in a system which doesn't have boundaries.
It is not easy.
Okay. You know, you are not going anywhere without, following us on our socials. Instagram @_ThyGap. Twitter @ThyGap, and Facebook ThyGap it is. Or why not write email to us, mindthygap@gmail.com. For other people who only use Apple, you can also give us a rating and leave a comment on our ThyGap podcast. Because you know what all doctors say, ThyGap podcast. Subscribe and share.